Some of the worst times of my life is when I actually made the most money. I worked every single day. I also worked most of Christmas Day. Your destination doesn't necessarily matter. What matters is what fuel you're running on. I went into the accident 2 years ago. I was only involved in 2 businesses. Now we're at 6, and that's been through 2 years of recovery. There's zeros that you don't take with you, and sometimes we get caught up chasing zeros that we're not going to take with us. Most people step back and they're like, well, my business doesn't fucking survive without me. Well, it's not a business. That means you're self-employed.
You have your own mortgage company, you have over 6 businesses, but you said something today that I was kind of like, it kind of piqued my interest. Alex Hormozy has a quote that says, death has 100% tax. And you say people spend too much time counting the zeros. Can you share that story?
Yeah, I mean, it's not well formulated. Today was probably the first time I said it in like that format, but essentially, yeah, it was, there's zeros that you don't take with you, and sometimes we get caught up chasing zeros that we're not going to take with us. And so that was kind of the concept, and that was talking about my near-death experience in the car accident.
Can you share that story?
Where do you want to start? the part about the accident itself? Or?
Yeah, the accident itself.
I'll do like a quick overview of it, and then we can dive into whatever part you want, because I feel like there's different layers to it. But the overview of the accident was, so I was traveling with my son. We were coming back from a vacation in Southern California, and I do that drive all the time, so it's not uncommon at all. It's something I do very regularly, or I did. And we had made it from LA, got caught up a couple different times for whatever reason, so it got a little later than we would normally travel, but we were still making our way back. And I was in my Tesla, so one of the last charges that I had to do, I was looking at the time, it was a little bit later, and I was like, no, I'm almost home. I was almost within like 45 minutes of being home, so I'm like, I just want to sleep in my bed, want to get us home. So I took off from that last station. I was on the road for maybe 20, 30 minutes, and I remember it's at night, it's dark, but I remember looking at a set of headlights, and it just looked like a little off pattern. You can't really tell. This is on the 99, which has it to where you can always kind of see the other side of traffic, so it's not uncommon. But there was something that seemed a little off, and I remember as I was driving, just leaning up a little bit, like literally like this, just peering, and I was like, and I said out loud, I think that guy's on the wrong side of the road. Like literally, like the word left my mouth, and then it's like immediately the headlights were in front of me. So I was the part of the freeway that I was traveling was a curve, so I wasn't like I was looking very far ahead, but I was just kind of seeing it. I knew it was in a distance. I didn't know how close it was. I couldn't determine that, but as soon as I got through the curve and the lights lined up on me, this gentleman was directly in front of me in my lane, and split second trying to determine what to do in that instance. And there was a vehicle that was next to me, and I didn't want to. My son happened to be in the passenger seat. I was in the driver's seat, obviously. So I didn't want to jerk the wheel into the other vehicle, even though that would have got me out of the path. But I just knew my son was on that side, so I didn't want to make that. I didn't want to put him at risk. And so I remember just trying to calculate every which way that I could get around that. And so the best that I could do in that split second was I as much as I could, leaned the vehicle to one side of the lane, hugging it, without hitting the other car. And so I just knew that he was going to hit me head on. So we basically hit driver to driver because he was opposite. Yeah. And so that sent us into a spin. But I didn't. Making that split decision, the calculated move was I'm going to minimize damage to my son's side and he'll have a chance. But I made that decision not thinking I was going to survive. Almost confident that I wasn't. And so immediately after that, to my surprise, I woke up. I actually woke up fairly quickly, like maybe within a minute of the hit. It was pretty instant before my son woke up. And so I remember talking to him, and we were able to eventually get rescued from the vehicle, but it was a very long road to recovery. I think I spent close to 4 months, if not 4 months, in at UC Davis. I had to get transferred up there because I had a lot of critical conditions. They were trying to stabilize me. I flatlined. They wanted to amputate both my legs. They thought that I was paralyzed. Just a number of things. My son also sustained some injuries. His were less life-threatening, but we were more concerning, like his long-term growth and things like that. But he actually bounced back pretty quickly. Thank God. He's just, being as young as he was, and he took less impact, thankfully. But yeah, so pretty crazy endeavor. And then that's what I was talking about this morning. So I just crossed the 2-year mark. So I'm 2 years post accident. Still in recovery in a lot of ways, but making progress.
Yeah. And you mentioned that there's a time in the car that you felt like you were going to die, and it kind of played into why you wanted to create Fuel. Mm-hmm. How did that kind of shape your thinking today?
It's kind of, well, the way that I had laid it out today when we were speaking was one of the things that I did. So the way that I phrase it is, instead of my life flashing before my eyes, my life crawled before my eyes. There was a lot of time and space to acknowledge things and process, and there's that's what I was saying this morning. There's probably going to be a book on each section of this, because there was just so much life altering perspective in it. But from the perspective of Fuel in particular, one of the things, besides the comment about there's some zeros you can't take with you, so there's things that are very fulfilling, that are going to stay with you. They're going to make an impact not only on yourself, but you could choose to make impacts through your family, or through business. But either way, those impacts can be generational, right? And then some of the pursuits are more temporal. It's just, hey, it's here for me to enjoy, which is fine. There's you need that, but for me, one of the real takeaways, and one of the ways that I've proceeded to sort of live my life, is I don't want to hold back or put anything on the shelf. As responsibly as I can, I want to take every opportunity that comes my way to advance my reach and my impact, right? Because from my perspective, and there's a whole lot that we can dig into, but just quick overview. But from my perspective, it is annoying, and I use the word annoying because that's the best way that I could phrase it, but it is annoying how much, I'm going to use the word providence, but how many things lined up in my life through that experience to get me here on the other side. From being just so happened at the time that I went into the hospital, there was somebody there that had something that was experimental that they used to save one of my legs. And it happened. I know that because it just so happened that person was the cousin of one of the people that I know, and he reached out and was like, "Hey, I'm working on this person." And same thing too. As soon as I was in the hospital, people were already alerting my family, just because there was so many. It's not a coincidence. It's not a coincidence after it's so many.
Yeah.
And that's the annoying part of it. It was where it's almost like a screaming of, hey, there was something bigger at play here. And so I feel responsible to leverage that as much as I can, right? And before, pre-accident, there was a lot of times in my life where I lived on a smaller scale, and it was more temporal. It was more, I want to do this. Why do I want to do this? Because it's fulfilling for me, right? And now, being post, I want to do things that are going to have a more long-lasting impact for my family, for my friends, but also for my community. And a lot of what brought me through that endeavor was really, at the end of the day, my community. There was an insane and overwhelming response from the community that I'm a part of, locally, statewide, nationwide, through all of these various channels and real estate leadership and all of these things that I've done over the years, that I was just thinking and when I say that that things that I was working on before where temporal, I did still work really hard, and I've worked hard for years to be involved in volunteer leadership and raising leadership and developing it. So I was still moving, but the point that I'm trying to make to that is, and I think everybody can relate to this because I'm sure I'm not the only one that's ever felt this, but there are so many times in our life where I feel like we're presented with opportunities and it's constant. The difference of us taking that opportunity and creating some form of success or impact out of it really just comes down to a decision whether we think that we can step to the plate and take it on or whether we think that we can't, right? And that's something I know so I can't be alone in that, but I know that's something constantly where it's like I would have an opportunity to even before, like there was a couple opportunities where it's like, we can have you speak at this thing, or we'd like to have you do that. And I'm in my head, I'm just like, well, I'm not ready. Like, oh no, I'm sorry, I can't make that right now, or things like that, right? Things that I would hit the snooze button on, right? Just like getting out of bed, right? At the end of the day, though, if you're motivated and you take the opportunity to hear that first alarm and get out of bed, you're going to have a more impactful day, right?
Yeah.
Right? Okay. And it's the same thing with life, right? Those opportunities, that's our alarm going off, and we just hit snooze all the time. And that's the way that I lived, not 100% of the time, but more than I want to admit, right? Now, on this side of that situation, that bookmark in my life, I don't want to take those for granted, and I don't want to put myself in a place of limits because, once again, like going back to it, the brevity of life was really apparent living it through that situation, right? And so that's more so where I'm at. So going back to, that was a really long answer, but I'm going to try to circle it back here. So fuel is one of the facets of that. The goal for fuel is, and it's evolving as well, because this is something, fuel hasn't been around for 10 years. This is something that's within its infancy. It's within its first year of creation. We just started with calling it a conference. Then it turned into, we're going to call it the Fuel Conference. Then it turned into now it's the fuel masterminds that are going to fuel it. So what I'm attempting to do in my area, and every area is a little bit different. I'm originally from LA. So growing up there, one of the things that I appreciated when I started to get into business, I never was in a place where I could say that I firmly had a mentor or somebody that I could look up to. My dad was the closest that I had to that, but he passed away when I was 18, and he was a tremendous impact. He made a tremendous impact on me in terms of business. A lot of negative things too, but business was for sure, he was a positive in. And I appreciated that so much. Then when I didn't have that safety rail anymore in my life, it got to where I started getting involved in different aspects of business. And so I got to attend so many different events and things. There was always something business centric that was going on down there. And if you knew where to get plugged into, whether it was like some of the small business development groups, whether it was some of the mixers, the 40 under 40 things, there was just always, it was very centric to, we are promoting leadership in business. And here in the Central Valley, after speaking with Hashim a little bit, he brought up a really good point, and it's a sore spot for me too, because even though I was in business to some degree when I was living in Southern California, I've really gotten more involved and actually into business and entrepreneurship being here in the Central Valley. And so I really, people ask me all the time, why would you live here? And the answer is, well, it's an amazing place. If you don't live here right now and you're thinking about moving, it sucks. Don't listen to me. No, I'm just kidding. No, it's a great area. But the opportunity here is immense. And so, it's afforded a lot of opportunity for me and my family. It helps me support my family. So like I hold it in high regard. And so that's part of what I am shooting to give back now with Fuel. It's the ideology that you don't have to go into a bigger city or a larger area to get some of that. So I'm trying to create that culture. And we were just having a meeting this morning with a business leader in town, and I was telling them, like, culture starts by a decision being made, which is, I want more of this, right? Mm-hmm. And then you get a couple people together, and that starts to create a culture, and you get those people regularly meeting together and bringing more people, and that's, now we have a movement of this is what we want. And in this particular area, the unfortunate thing to me is me knowing both sides, me knowing the larger cities, that hyper competitiveness, how much less opportunity there. is more activity, but there's less opportunity sometimes in those bigger areas. And so, but I hear all the time that people are fleeing this area to go seek what they think is an opportunity in one of those areas, and the opportunities are really here. And I'm a testament to that. Even pre-accident, I went into the accident. To give you some scope, so 2 years ago, I was only involved in 2 businesses. Now we're at 6.
Yeah,
and that's been through 2 years of recovery, right? So that's an insane growth pattern that you would just like, why, how is that happening? Some of that's mindset, whatever. But regardless of that, we've kind of talked about that. The opportunity presented itself. Maybe I'm jumping at opportunities more, and there's a snowball effect. It takes 20 years to be an overnight success, right? So like people see that. I tell people all the time, if you knew me, 8-9 years ago, you wouldn't have thought anything special about me, right? That was my 20 years of just learning, right? But with Fuel, having it a conference where we're bringing some thought leaders, some very motivational people, some very dynamic and tactical business coaches. We're bringing them here to do a conference. The conference, even though that's going to be a huge event and spectacle that we're going to try to make it. The point is for it to really try to jumpstart the culture. And to get people to say, I don't have to go out to the Bay Area. And then the cool thing is it's great for the area. I happen to also, more recently, I got involved. I'm on a board for the Downtown Improvement District for Modesto as well. Even though I'm an LA kid at heart still, they let me in there, which is cool. But yeah, so it's great for the community. It's going to raise the bar a little bit. And like I said, the biggest thing is for people to look around and say, wow, there's business here. And so we're not only bringing in some of these top talents, and we're also going to be searching, and we're putting together a panel of local business leaders as well to expose people to this is the commerce and the business and the scope of things that are here. And we kind of joke about it all the time, but I was telling this story, it was 2 weeks ago. I was at just a bar down the street, and I started chatting to somebody there, older guy, and he had been a CEO, CFO of a $200 million company for over 20 years. He's a consultant now, good guy, semi-retired. And I was just talking to him, and I'm like, you have so much knowledge. And he's like, yeah, I did. He's like, but I like to live a quiet life. And I said, I respect that a lot. But while you're living a quiet life, people are not supporting your community because they don't think that kind of opportunity you had starting at a low level, basically as like a part-time, I forget how he started, but it was very part-time. It was definitely entry level. And he worked his way up through the ranks to be there. And I was like, you don't hear those kind of opportunities all the time anymore. That's not, but they are here, right? And you can do that here in the Valley. It still has that ideology and a lot of those morals of we bring up people from within. We take talent, and then we will help mold it, right? And some of the faster paced areas, that's not the case. It's like, who's the next greatest, biggest thing, and we're moving on, right? So that's what we're attempting to do. That was a really long answer. I hope you didn't fall asleep, but no. but that's the scope of what we're doing, and it's growing because, like I said, initially the thought was, let's throw a conference, and I was like, well, it's a crazy idea, but you have connections, I have some background in doing that, but really at the core of it, like I said, it's really addressing some of the things that I have seen a need, or I have felt a vacuum. I know others have too, right? Where it's like there's a space here that's not being catered to and taken care of, and so a lot of times you can make we kind of talked about that a little bit today, like the different mentalities. But you could bitch about it, which a lot of people do, or you can do something about it, and try to fill that space, and that's what I'm trying to do. That's what we're trying to do with this.
Nice. And I want to get into like the growth from going from 2 to 6 businesses, but there's kind of a little bit to unpack there. Mm-hmm. It's interesting how you said like you learned a lot from your dad, and then when he ended up leaving you at 18, you've kind of felt that void. Yeah. And for example, Hashim knows this story about me of why I do this podcast is because my grandfather, he passed away, and he spent all his time becoming an expert in business and other things. and the podcast is a way to kind of share that expertise.
Great. Okay.
But I was curious because it sounds like there's something there of like why this is important to you about being that leader and kind of sharing that like body of knowledge to others. And I was just curious where that might come from.
It's there's a lot of angles to that. What I would say is, one, I remember I was attending some sort of seminar or conference years and years ago. I was young at the time, but if you've gone through, and I'm sorry to hear about grandfather, like I know loss is like never easy, right? That's something that is so traumatic. For me, my dad and my mom, they both passed away when I was 18. And so I had just turned 18 and, it was a huge blow. My dad, luckily, and when I say luckily, it's weird how it all played out. But I actually hadn't graduated high school. I was just not motivated. I didn't feel like the high school that I just, my dad had started me very young working in the family business. And so I had always had the mindset of like, what kid doesn't want to see what his dad is up to and how he's doing things. And so he did, in some healthy and unhealthy ways, groomed me for, business.
What type of business was it?
So my dad was actually, he had a couple different businesses. He started as an owner operator on the trucking side. So that was probably his first taste of business. He later got into legal support. So, which is really funny because now I'm in mortgage. So I basically create debt and he was the one that was retrieving debt when it would go bad. So we were both in finance in weird ways. But so he did, legal support, judgment enforcement, debt recovery kind of stuff. And so that was his business. And so, but yeah, I started working in that family business when I was in fourth grade. That was my chores. Plus I had to, at the time they didn't have online banking. I had to call the bank and like ask what checks would clear. I basically created an online banking report for my dad every day on an Excel spreadsheet. And I was in fourth grade. And so
that's wild.
Yeah. And that's just the way it was. It was just like, you're going to work in the business there was just no real fighting it. But my dad he tried to go into different areas. He had a computer store for a little while. That ended up not working out. He learned a lot through that. So I always observed him in some sort of arena. I didn't appreciate it at the time. I was a kid, so I didn't really truly understand what was going on. And I think now, even the negative parts that I know I was introduced to, I see more context to it. Some of it I'm really thankful for. Some of it I'm still like, that wasn't the best decision. But from that perspective, the point being that getting to the point, this is what I had heard when I had attended this conference, it was basically the point like I had as an orphan at that point. There's always this void where you're like, okay, like if you think about it, your parents, they're the biggest safety net that you ever have, and it doesn't matter where you're at in life. And this kind of speaks back to sort of the post-accident mindset versus the pre-accident mindset, which is not having a safety net for most of my adult life. I did have to play things pretty safe. Like there was risks that I took, but every risk was extremely calculated because there was no backup. Yep. Right, I had nowhere to retreat. It's a lot of the story of, which sometimes they say it's fictional, but everybody's heard of burning your ships right on the shore, and you're like, we got to win this battle because we can't go anywhere. I don't know if it's true or not, but either way, that's literally what it feels like. It's just like there's no boats, so this is it. So from that perspective, the moral of the story with what the speaker had laid out there was, if you feel like you're really wanting something and it's not there, right? If you feel like you want somebody to help you with this, you will feel like you want that. The best way to achieve that is for you to help someone else, right? Like you be that person to someone, right? And it sounds counterintuitive because you're like, well, how is it if I need something and now instead of somebody giving me something, I'm giving something to someone else? That seems counterintuitive. There's no way. That's a paradox. How's that going to work? And so that's always stuck with me though, because I've really having that mentality, I've really had a heart to see people grow and develop, and to have a healthier relationship with business and leadership. And I was given a very bastardized version of it, and I was sort of indoctrinated with that from my father. But going back to it, two sides of the coin, he tried his best,
Yep.
and he had very limited resources, right? And so there's still some things he's responsible for, but at the end of the day, I have more context to what was going on. And so from that perspective, I think that's why I've had a drive to give that to others, is because I know in most of my adult life that was a spot I never had, right? The last member of my adult family that I had was my grandmother, and I was very, very close with her. And through her last couple of years, we weren't as close because of family situations and what was going on. But she was my last safety net, and I think she passed away probably 6 years after my parents. And I'm now going on 25 years, no, sorry, 20 years, 22 years that they've been gone. So, so she's been gone for a minute too. So basically, that's a huge hole.
Yeah.
And so I think that's part of the reason why I see that, and I appreciate that, and I see people that are really, especially like I'm involved a lot in the Young Professionals Network for the Real Estate Association. I'm kind of helping overseeing 2 different chapters right now. But I see a lot of people that have so many great qualities, but there's still that void. And I think that, coupled with this other comment, which you guys can argue with me on, but social media has given an entire generation a false narrative of what success is and what leadership is. And it is an epidemic of sorts, because I don't know if people are truly seeing, like I said, I understand it takes 20 years to be an overnight success. I was raised with that ideology, and I've seen it play out in my personal life. And I see people all the time, and they're in their first couple of years of business, and they feel like they need to be some powerhouse person, and it's a very short-lived success. And what they don't show on the other side is most of the time it's false. Most of the time they feel empty. Most of the time they're losing their soul in the chase of the zeros, right? That prominence, right? And I don't know where it got fabricated that that's the case, but I feel like it's accelerated an entire generation that is chasing, something that really at the end of the day is just screen magic, right? A lot of times, right? I've heard several stories of people that think that there's prominent people and that run successful businesses, and there's stories about them test driving cars to pull them around the side to shoot a video,
Shoot
like
the
they
videos, yeah.
right, like they have made
stuff.
it, right? Exactly. And you're just like, but why? I mean, I get the hook part of it, and there's also redeeming parts of social media. I'm not anti, but I'm just saying that in the business sector, it's really taken a toll. And I'm hoping that by introducing some very well traveled roads and principles to this younger generation, that they'll start to see, okay, like it's going to take time. I can work my way up from the bottom, right? You just don't hear that though being promoted. Everyone's like, I'm going to be a YouTube. My son, the number one job that my son wants is he wants to be a YouTuber. Yeah, and I'm like, and I explained to him, we have conversations all the time, and I'm like, that's a business, right? And he was like, no, it's not, Dad, it's YouTube. And I was like, okay, well, you have to plan your content, and you're going to have to shoot. You're going to have to storyboard and come up with your ideas. You're going to have to coordinate, and you're going to need to get crews. You're going to have to get funding, right? Where does it come? I mean, yeah, you could start with a phone, but like that's not what Mr. Beast is doing right now, right? So it's like explaining all the principles, and the principles are all the same. Social media has changed some dynamics that can play, but the principles are still there.
Yeah.
Right. And I think that's one of the things that I really have enjoyed about business is understanding that I can, I haven't heard my dad's voice for, I don't even know if I have a recording of it, but I haven't heard him for 22 years, right? But his words are constantly in my head because they're principles of business.
Is there like a specific principle that you keep in your head, or like one or two?
There's a couple of them. I would say one of the, I actually don't say this, but I say it to myself. I don't say it out loud. I say it to myself all the time. But one of the things my dad used to always throw out there to me is if you show me the little things, I'll show you the big things. And that was one of the biggest things that he would beat me with, not physically at times, but just down with. And I think about that all the time. I think about, it's funny, I'll walk into my office all the time. No one's ever even said, I don't even know if anyone sees me do it, but I'll pick up pieces of paper or trash on the way into the office every day. If I don't care, from the parking lot in here, I'll pick something up. I always walk in here with some piece of garbage in my hand, more than likely, if there's one out there. And it's from a story that my dad told me about one of the CEOs of Disney, and he just got out from back surgery. And my dad was telling me the story about how they're walking through the park, and you have all the executives with him. And after back surgery, he bends over and he picks up a piece of trash. And everybody was shocked, and they were just like, but on the same token, he was like, this is the standard that we have, right? So I think that there's like a book that I could write about these little things. And it's not original. There's nothing that's like 100% his necessarily. It's all taken from...
It all comes from...
Zig Ziglar and stuff. The thing is, and that's I think the joy of... the way that I explain it, like watching my dad go through it. My dad was a first generation business owner in my family, and of any of my generations that I know of, outside of some other distant family in Mexico. But seeing my dad go through that and watching it, and then getting into where I got into life, and I actually rejected it for a while. I was like, I don't want to be a business owner. I don't want to do sales. I just want a nice
Which
job.
Is ironic now.
Yeah, oh my gosh. It's super ironic. But I did. I went to the corporate world thinking that I'd made it, because I was like, this is everything that it wasn't. This is structure. This is this. But then with that came all of the negative sides of that coin, right? Where it's like, I couldn't advance my career. I was beholden to what people thought I was capable of, right?
Is that where you kind of talk about playing it safe? Corporate?
Those are definitely sections. Yeah. So, and adding to the business trauma, the last layer of that, one of the last layers of that is after my dad passed away, I actually, I was running a business at the time doing the same thing he did. I was actually recycling clients that he had lost, and I was picking them up. So we were kind of working somewhat in tandem. But after he passed away, I had to take over his company, which was in complete disarray. He had so much debt racked up. There was just things that I had no clue. I knew some of what was going on, but I didn't know the extent. It was a lot of robbing Peter to pay Paul. It was extremely dysfunctional. Looking back at it now, I could cringe. At the time, I was just like, this is normal. This is how you run a business, right? I was just like, my dad's running. This is how he ran it. His credit card was charged up until this accounts receivable came in, and horrible. Anyways, but the last real trauma of that was closing that business and trying to finish that out, and it just got to the point where it was unsustainable. And I was like, it was to the point where I was getting into debt, trying to take care of the business to get the business back on its feet. And I was a 19-year-old kid. I barely get a credit card. And here I am, whatever credit that I'm getting, I'm maxing out to pay for filing fees and things to get the business done. And I was like, it's done. Like, there's just no way. So unwinding that and closing that and having all the hard conversations, and it was extremely defeating, right? Like at that tail end of that. And that goes back to that small feeling where it's just like, I don't want to be in that position. I don't want to ever have to deal with that again. So I think that was the real, besides a whole other chapter we don't have to get into, but besides all that, it was just really traumatic. And that's where I was like, going back to playing it small, I want to be safe. I want to know what I'm getting. I want to have like all that. And I did it. I did it for, once I really started back over there, maybe 8 years or so of my life until I got into the mortgage side. And that kind of spurred, ironically, that safe path led me to the dangerous path again of being in business. And then I was like, well, if I'm already here, it was a very cooking the frog moment of like, well, I'm doing that. It would be great if I could do this. And so like each step took me further and further down the path of like, oh shit, now I'm in business again. Right? It's full circle. I'm back here.
Yeah. That's crazy. Because a lot of the times business and life, like the things that we avoid often come from like past in a way. Like a lot of people in sales, like don't get into sales necessarily because they want to. A lot of the times they get into sales because they need to.
Yeah.
And they're not always, sometimes they're back in a corner.
Right.
And then when they're trying to actually grow the business, they're actually having to like spend money, invest in the business, hire
Right.
people, and it kind of puts them in like a new corner.
Mm-hmm.
And that kind of trauma can block you from like making that first hire, from investing in the business. And you're now you have 6 businesses, and some people might look at that and be like, that's crazy. Like, how do you even manage all 6?
Yeah.
And you come from a place of like not necessarily having the best like outside teaching
Mm-hmm.
of how to manage a business, how to manage finances. Like, what do you have to learn in order to be able to manage 6 businesses profitably and then not go crazy running all 6?
It's debatable whether I'm going crazy or not. I would say it depends on the day of the week. But what I would say is that even though, and we throw out the number 6 because that sounds super impressive, the majority of it is really like maybe three, 3 to 4. Some of them are a little bit auxiliary, or they're where I'm trying to like vertically integrate. So like the catering company that we have that is starting up to be its own independent company, it works in tandem. It's vertically integrated from the restaurants company,
yep.
right? So like some of it's not like I'm in another lane, but I'm also getting to the point of where I'm going vertical instead of going, horizontal at that point, if that makes sense.
Yep.
And so, so that being said, it's a constant learning. I think that one of the things that has really been a part of my process has been a commitment to learn, and also a commitment not to breathe my own atmosphere. And I think that becomes really easy. Breathing your own atmosphere essentially is like when you get to a certain level, and it happens in any industry. It doesn't. You don't have to be a business owner to do that, but it's where you start to believe that you're at the top of some sort of game, right? Yep. I've reached the zenith of whatever this is, right? And one of the benefits I've had in business is being involved in a business that is extremely egocentric. Real estate is an extremely egocentric business, right? It just is, right? Everybody has their name everywhere. It's all about branding yourself. It's all about
the rankings are online.
Yeah, the rankings are there.
Everyone's number one.
It's performative. Yes, exactly. There's 50 million people that are in the top 1% of something. It's a very egocentric business, and coming from and I don't think I actually really thought about it in this context until I'm talking it out right now, but coming from the perspective of my dad being in business, my dad made the mistake of being very egocentric at points. Not initially, but he did get there, and he got to a point where it probably destroyed him. Now looking at it contextually in some ways, and then I don't know if he ever got out of that. And I think that not to cut out of this real quick for a second, but I think some of that's generationally too. What happens? I think that's one of the great things about what I do as well, or what I've done for years now, is being able to look over people's finances, and whether it was in banking and mortgage and things like that. So in a way, I've almost studied sociology without going to college for it, because it's just naturally a part of the job. You just notice patterns and things like that. But I think that I think my dad was probably a victim to what a mentality was for his generation, which was, in his generation, there was this ideology of you need to compete with the Joneses, right? Yeah. You're doing as good as whoever else is on your block, and if they're lapping you. And I remember one of the things that I remember, and it's like one of the funniest things in the world, but my dad had a sticker on our boat, and it was the one who dies with the most toys wins. And I remember him thinking like that was such a cool, so much so that he put a fucking bumper sticker on his boat to say that, right? And it's like, that is such an ass backwards like paradigm to say, yeah, like you're like, and once again, it speaks to what I'm talking about, which
It
is
goes
like,
back to the whole zeros.
it goes back to the whole zeros thing, which is like, why? Like you could have, we didn't need the boat. I could have had a better dad, and that would have like saved me years of therapy and been better for, you know, the generations past, right? So anyways, just to go, sorry to go off topic there, but I do think every generation faces its own challenges, right? I think that I have noticed that from some of the older, generations that were before me, is that it was much more centric to this competition situation. I don't know why, but that's what it seemed like. And when I deal with that clientele, it's really interesting because like when I deal with like millennials, for example, they're extremely conservative as a group. Like they don't ask how much they can purchase something for. They ask like, this is how much we're comfortable with the payment. Can you get, where can you get us with that? And then if I talk to somebody that's like from like a baby boomer generation, they're just like, how much can I afford? What's the top? They just want to know the number. It, like the top number does something for them. It's so, but I would never, very rarely do I ever hear a millennial saying, what's my top? They're always, and if you think about it, they were, which we were, I'm in that group, but we were in basically coming into our adult years during a massive recession, right? So it's just like, it's really traumatizing. So generationally, I think it's interesting, some of the dynamics, but going back to the original thing of seeing my dad's perspective on that, and how he was trying to like pursue something that wasn't probably the best pursuit, I guess, at the end of the day. And then being able to be in my position where now I'm second generation business owner, and I had the advantage of seeing, living, and being brought up in that wreckage and saying, okay, there could be a better path, right? It doesn't mean I'm smarter at all. It just means that I actually got the exposure to go through some experience. He paid for those lessons. I paid for those lessons by proxy because I was stuck with the guy. I was in that family, right? And then it's like, okay, well, where do we go from here, right? What's the next best way to do this, possibly?
Do you have an email database, but you struggle staying consistent with your email marketing? Email marketing is still one of the most under-leveraged marketing platforms, yet it has the highest return on investment. For every dollar you spend, you get 36 to 1 ROI. So if you want to profit more from your marketing, you need a local email newsletter. So that's why we created the local email newsletter playbook that breaks down Ryan Snaden's entire Naptown Scoop playbook and how he built it from 0 to 30,000 email subscribers and makes over $320,000 every single year. It breaks down his entire strategy, and not just for his local newsletter, but also how he grew the media company to over $500,000 every single year. It goes through his content strategy, how he grew. It goes through his entire team, how he hires, his monetization, everything. So if you want the $320,000 local email newsletter playbook, click the link in the description below. Download it now. It's completely free. It has over 21 pages behind how he built his entire media company. So click the link in the description and download now. I don't know if you've ever heard, and this is obviously an extreme way of saying it in a way to kind of make the point, but like, I don't know if you follow Ed Milet, but he's always like the power of one in the generation, and there's always that one who kind of changes the trajectory.
Yes.
Does that ever kind of like cross your mind?
It does in some ways, and then some ways it doesn't. I do believe that, if anything, so one, the concept, yes, I believe in, absolutely. But I think the thing is, like, for me, I don't like it just being one.
Yeah.
You know, if that makes sense. Because, and this is probably a little Central Valley of me to say, but it's like, there's also such power in a community, right? And if the community does well, then the one does well, right? It's like one of those, it's like a beautiful mind where it's like the best thing for the one person is the outcome of the group, right?
The lifting, the rising tides lift all boats.
All boats, yeah. And so that's kind of the way that I try to attack it. But yeah, I do believe in that concept, and I think that, but you know, for me too, like with my family, I wish, even though I'm not extremely close to a lot of my family and my extended family, but do I wish that we could all, you know, rise on the tide? Yeah, absolutely. And some of them Some of them choose to go whatever path they want at the end of the day. There's nothing. It's all good. But what I love that for everyone that is willing to, yeah, absolutely. I think that's great, and I think that goes back to the previous thing that you were saying about the, or I was kind of touching on about leadership and developing leadership and helping young people that are looking for how to become leaders and things like that. Because I do think that there's so many people that are capable of reaching that place if they have a little. It doesn't take like a gene. It doesn't take like somebody sitting down and like lecturing you. It's just a little guidance. A little guidance goes a long way, to people. And a little guidance at pivotal parts of my life has changed that. That's the 3 degrees of change that took my life from here to there. Right. So
yeah. What do you think people get wrong about leadership, and what do you think is kind of like the right way to be a leader?
So the way that I say it is like, there's no right or wrong. I don't necessarily, prescribe to that, but what I do know is that there's different ways that people lead.
Yep.
And I'm a big believer in that. My style of leadership is much more like servant leadership style. And so that has its own drawbacks for sure. It's a lot like gentle parenting. it's like the gentle parenting of leadership, really, if you think about it, right? Where it's like, I want to be a servant, and that sounds so great. But at the end of the day, this kind of is going to speak to where the social media thing. That's also at times probably not a great take on it as well, because it's very difficult to be egocentric, and self-promoting when you have that structure. Right? Because it's like, my team, I want to push people. I want them to be the best versions of themselves. I want them to rise to the top. I want those kind of things, right? And so I'm not going to say that's the style that I really enjoy. There's also versions of leadership, though, where it is different. And I think that I like that idea of the difference between a boss and a leader, right? There's some leadership that's really a boss, where it's like, this is the guy. He's the man. People kiss the ring. Like, it's always about him being the top person and what he's doing, things like that, or he or she, sorry, because it could be both. And so, I'm not going to say that that's wrong, but I do know that being involved in organizations that have had both patterns, and those are the 2 major patterns I would say that are out there. I really do. I would say that some of the most rewarding times that I've had personally and developmentally wise has come from people that were really looking out for their team, right? And so I try to mimic that same thing, but I don't know if it's necessarily right. My wife and I always talk about that. My wife's, side note, one of the smartest business people that I know, even though she thinks that I don't listen to her, I actually do. But her and I go back and forth about that, because my wife is very black and white in her thought process. She's extremely analytical, and she's very operationally minded. And so there'll be times where my wife will give me guidance, very sharp, it's like Arjun kind of joked about earlier today, where, what was he talking about? I probably can't say it on here because it's being recorded, but anyways, but he was just talking about how there's certain ethnic traits that people have and things like that. Loosely, that's what he was talking about. But anyways, but the point is, there's some people that are just very good at being that way, and they tend to be successful in whatever facet they're in, business, otherwise, and things like that. And so I feel like that other paradigm's really good, because it's just black and white. It's like, hey, I'm here, you're here to make me money. I'm here to tell you what to do, like da 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 da. And I see that it works for some people. So I'm not going to say that's why that's why nobody works for one company. There's multiple companies and because some work for others, and then some people get therapy and they're like, shit, that's not good for me anymore. I need to go somewhere else, right? So that's kind of the take that I have, and I don't think, I don't know if I would classify it as right or wrong necessarily.
Yeah.
I've had both, and I just know what I enjoy and what I want to do, but I do also, kind of goes back to that quote of about the man in the arena, right? If we look at that, where it's like, I kind of tend to respect anyone that's in the arena, right? Mm-hmm. So anybody that's in leadership, it's still thankless, right? Even if you have it structured to where, you're the top dog kind of, you have that other mentality, it's still, it's a really daunting task for anyone to say, I'm going to be in front and I'm going to act like I know what I'm doing as I'm learning like you are, but you're trusting me and I'm trying to guide you the best that I can until I learn something in 6 months and I'm like, shit, I wasn't guiding you the best way. Let's go back and revisit that, right? So, from that perspective, it's like I respect anyone that's at least setting foot in the arena. I think that most people that are setting foot in an arena like that of leadership and business, they're going to learn lessons. And the person that might start off business like that in a couple of years, they might say that doesn't work. And I see it now. And those were the lessons that they had to pay for to get the education that said, I'm going to do it this way. Right. So, and that's the way that I look at it too. Like you were kind of talking about juggling multiple things, right. And all this stuff. But at the end of the day, I'm smart enough to know how stupid I am is the reality of it. Because I know that I'm in a process and there's times where I'll look back and I'll think about a decision I made a year ago and I'll cringe. And I'm like, why would I think that was remotely a fucking good idea? I can cuss on this, right?
Yeah,
you
can cuss.
Okay, you edit it out if you want
yeah,
to.
You're good.
But why would I think that was a good idea now knowing what I know, right? And it's like, so old me, I was just like, what were you thinking, right? And you can't go backwards. But on the same token, if you're not challenging yourself and learning, that's the only way to do it. I make big mistakes sometimes. I make leadership mistakes sometimes. Sometimes I wish I could go back and correct something. And, at the end of the day, like those are the way that I see it is like you could go to business school, the best business school in the country and pay the highest tuition you can to go through that school. And you can come out and you're still going to have to pay in life's lessons to learn leadership, or you can be in leadership and you can make mistakes. And that's your tuition, right? Yeah. So anytime I make a mistake, I see it as like I wrote the check. Arjun kind of touched on it too today, but that's really my take. Like I say all the time, like you already paid for the lesson, you might as well take it, right? Like anytime somebody comes to me and they're like, oh my gosh, I made this mistake or whatever. Okay, well, so what's the lesson you paid for? What was it? Well, I shouldn't have done. Okay, cool. So now take that, and that's what you paid for.
That's a good question.
Right? So if you already know that you paid, just grab it. You already paid. That's like leaving your groceries at the store. You already went shopping. Like it's rung up. Grab the fucking bag and go. Right? So like that's the way that I see it. And I wish, that you don't, that no one would have to go through that process, but that's just like, that's not logical because then people wouldn't be doing it. They wouldn't be challenging themselves. They wouldn't be venturing out. They wouldn't be stepping out. And that's why I said, like, I love the concept of that quote of the man in the arena, because I feel like that's really what it is. Like you can train as much as you want, but once you set foot in that arena, there's nothing that's going to smell like that, feel like that, taste like that, hurt like that. Like that is real. That's applicable, and a couple blows in that arena will show you more than a myriad of studying, right? Scholastically will. Right? Yeah. Both important. I'm not diminishing like education because I'm a believer in it, but on the same token, that's just what I've encountered.
Yeah. And mistakes are part of entrepreneurship, and it's just whether you learn from them. But going to like your earlier point too, I think a lot of that type of leadership came, and it's not that it's wrong. Like Steve Jobs was a leader.
Yeah.
But he kind of led with like an iron fist.
Yeah.
There's kind of a new wave of like leaders,
right?
And like Gary Vee is probably just one of the most vocal about it,
right?
And just like you don't have to lead with like a stick, you can lead with honey,
right?
And it seems like that's kind of the way you lean.
And I think that's from the perspective of, well, I'll say this, and it's really funny because this is something that, going back to dad lessons, this is something that I witnessed from my dad, and I did the same thing too. When you don't have someone there, when you don't have that mentor situation, right, where you have a mentor, resource, whatever it is, that school that is teaching you lessons, right, you emulate what you think something is. And I learned that from a very young age. And I remember my dad telling me about that. He's like, oh, yeah, I did this because of this movie. Like, you have to act like this, right, where it's like, that's scripted and that's fictional. It's not. But still, we think, and we all do it, right? And the same thing, too, like I hear tons of stories, and I have stories like that, too, where I'm like, when I'm a kid, I see this, and I'm like, one day I'm going to do this like so-and-so, right? or I'm gonna buy a car that looks like this, and I'm one day the stupidest purchase I'm ever gonna make is I've almost twice bought the car from Training Day, like same model, same thing, all that other stuff. I'll have it one day, when my wife isn't looking. But either way, like, there's so much in our imaginations that we glean from these different sources, but we don't really vet the sources all the time, right? And so I think that going back to that, I remember my dad saying it, and I didn't realize I did it until probably a couple years in to business, probably around the same time where I started therapy, and I was like, why am I really doing what I'm doing, right? And that's when I realized, like, okay, I'm chasing something that I imagined was success, or I'm chasing zeros, right? And I think if this zero is gonna make me this, and then it doesn't, and that's one of the worst things for a high performer, is a high performer actually hits goals. And most people all strive to hit goals and then they don't. And then they're like, well, I'll do it next year, right? High performers hit goals and then they're left with themselves. And they're like, what's wrong with me? Why? I bought the car. I did this. If you really want to fuck someone up, give them everything on their vision board in a year, right? How many people do vision boards? And at the end of the year, like, I didn't get it done this year, right? So, well, it's going on my vision board next year, right? I'm going to put that on there, right? Imagine a year where you get everything on your vision board.
You cross the finish line and you realize...
It's the dog that hit the trash truck. You're just like, I caught it. Now what do I do with it? It's a trash truck. I'm not.
And you just move the pole and you just keep moving.
That's the thing. Yeah. And I think one of the benefits that I have, besides thousands of dollars of therapy, is that I got to witness somebody in business let it consume them. And I saw what it did to their family. And I saw the wreckage that it left. And I also saw the benefit that it left, because it was both. There's two sides to every coin. It's not all negative, right? And so I get to walk forward in my life with that perspective. It's taken me years to reconcile it. I'm going to be honest with you, because I've obviously gone through a whole bunch of stuff to get to this place. But at least from where I'm at now, going back to the whole leadership thing, I think that's where I have the advantage of saying, like, okay, well, we can choose to try to attack it this way instead, right? It's not that when you're going through processing something and you go through traumas and you deal with being given principles, but they're not framed the right way. It takes a while for you to deconstruct, but when you deconstruct it and you really you look at what's left, you're like, okay, so now I actually had this part not good, this part was great. Now that I have this tool that's here, like, how do I implement that in a way that's better for everyone, right? Like, how do I implement that where it's good for my family and things like that? And that's what I strive to do. Going back to the multiple businesses and stuff like that. Like, yeah, I have multiple businesses, but a lot of people can have multiple businesses and they can be owner operators of multiple businesses, and that's unsustainable. And then it took me a whole evolution to get to the point where I was like, I want to be an owner of a business. Not an operator of a business. And nobody really talks about that. They're just like, go, build your business. And most people step back and they're like, well, my business doesn't fucking survive without me. Well, it's not a business. That's means you're self-employed, which is great. And that's commendable. There's nothing wrong with that, right? But that next tier of it is like ownership. And not too many people get into the ownership lane. And for me, that's one of my endeavors that I'm trying to do. Is I saw my dad live his entire life that I recall, and I never saw him truly step into an ownership lane. He owned businesses, but the correct way to say it is that businesses owned him.
Really quickly, before we get back into the episode, did you know that email beats the ROI of social media 40-1? If you want to turn your email list into more listing appointments, then you need to check out Ella. Ella is the only email marketing agency for real estate agents. We help you build a hyper-local email newsletter. We also send conversation starter emails, and we do way more. So you can turn your email into a profitable marketing channel this year. Click the link below. Check it out. Hope to see you in there. Let's get back to the episode. So for anyone who wants to become an owner of the business, what do they have to do so that they don't fall into that owner-operator?
It's a constant struggle, and I think a lot of it has to do with evaluating. First and foremost, there's nothing wrong with being an owner-operator, just to throw that out there. That's an amazing model, and if you are satisfied, you can build that model in a very well put-together way where you don't have all the stresses right? So I think that's great. I was an owner operator for years. I had a really good system. I did really great with my family, and it supported us. And so like I love that model. I'm not saying,
Yeah.
I think that's one of the clarity pieces that I would like to throw out there is that you can make the decision that I'm going to be an owner operator and you can feel satisfied with that, and that's okay. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes sense.
You can actually say like, and I tell people all the time, like what's dangerous is when people don't have numbers to me. So like when I can talk to somebody and their thing is like, well, I want more, then that's like, okay, well, that's unrealistic. I don't want more. I want more quality of life. I want more of my free time. I want more of that. Like that makes sense, but not to where it's like there's no end in sight for the dollar amount that I want to attain or whatever, right? Like, and I respect it too. Don't get me wrong, but I love when I hear people and they're like, yeah, like I joke around all the time and I'd be like, yeah, I'll take a $5 million buyout. If I could build my business to where somebody's buying me out for $5 million, I'm good. Like, love you guys. I'm on to my next adventure, right? Like kind of a thing. But I'll hear people and they're just like, like they want this drive, right? And so going back to owner operator situations, you can be an owner operator, nothing wrong with that. To get to the place of being an owner it's a whole nother level, and it's a commitment. And I would say that most people aren't committed to it. And the reason why most people aren't committed to it is because as an owner operator, you have a standard of how things need to be done. And one of the things that works against you when you go from an owner operator to trying to be an owner is you have to get comfortable things not being to your standard. And ironically, that's what made you successful, but that's what holds you back from further success because, and you kind of talked about it with Steve Jobs, he ruled with an iron fist. He was able to manage that. Was there a lot of, you can read a lot of different takes on his leadership style and what it did to companies and people, and how it did he still build one of the best companies in the world? Even though I'm not a huge Mac fan, I'm more of a PC guy, but I do have an iPhone now. But did he build one of the best companies in the world? No one can argue that. He did, right? But at the end of the day, was there a lot of trauma and things and wreckage? And yeah, there was. There was a lot of it, right? Same token. So that's an example of it. And this goes back to the idea of fuel, which is funny because as we're building this thing, we're like, now we got a conference, now we got a brand, now it has to have an identity. What does it do? And fuel actually came about. It's an analogy that I use. And I've used it for years. I don't know where I originally started using it, but I know that I've said it for years. And that was, it doesn't necessarily, that your destination doesn't necessarily matter, right? What matters is what fuel you're running on. And this is what I learned through my dad and watching him go through stuff, through me trying to idolize an idea of business and getting into business. And then me ultimately destroying a huge part of my life and having to rebuild. And that was the fuel paradigm, which was people are confused and they think just because somebody is going through a particular journey that that's the success, and it's not. And so the analogy is if you drive a Honda Civic, right, and it's sitting in the parking lot and you fill it up with F1 racing fuel, is your Honda Civic going to make it to the grocery store? Maybe. How many trips to the grocery store is that Honda Civic going to make? Not very many. Right? Not at all. There's nothing wrong with the Honda Civic at the end of the day. This goes back to my owner-operator thing. You could be an owner-operator. You could be a prolific owner-operator and make a great living and have a great quality of life, right? But if you have the wrong fuel in the tank and you're trying to operate like an F1, trying to put that F1 fuel in there, that is going to destroy your engine, right? And in business, that's part of how we came up with the brand fuel when we were like, it needs a brand. And I was like thinking, and I was like, this is an analogy I use. And really, this is what I'm trying to hit on, which is the what you see as the end result isn't the success. Because I know a lot of people that have made that are multimillionaires that are unhappy with themselves. They lost their families. They destroyed their lives. They are addicts, right? And this goes back to the whole like vision board thing. Like you want to see somebody extremely unhappy, get them everything on their vision board. What do? Right? So many people, the only reason why the ideology of vision boards work is because people don't ever get the shit. So it rolls over to the next year, right? And I remember I was at one point in my career after I started to get going, and I was I remember this day vividly. I was grabbing the keys to my car and walking out of my house, and I go to hop in one of my cars, and I look at my garage, and it was a garage that my dad probably would have been really happy with, because there was a brand new Harley in there. I was driving a brand new top of the line truck. At the time, my partner, they had a brand new car. I think I had something else that was there. But anyways, at the end of the day, I stopped. This was years ago, and I was like, this is the dumbest thing in the world. I looked at it and I did the math, and I was like, I have about, with insurance and upkeep, I probably have about $10,000 a month in payments that is just sitting here in this garage. that and I'm like, and I'm taking one car to work, and I'm gonna work 18 hours that day probably, like, no bullshit. and I'm not gonna touch any of this stuff that's here. And it was one of the biggest slaps in my face, and I was like, why? What am I doing? And I remember when I started to, like, really unravel my life and my motivations and my fuel and things like that. And after, like I said, thousands of dollars worth of therapy, but for years, I actually forced myself. I drove like a 5-6-year-old truck around for like years, just years. Like, I still loved it. It was a nice truck, but I forced myself not to get anything new. I was taking away the high, if that makes sense.
Yeah. And going back to, like, the fuel, because this kind of ties together, it's like, ultimately, like, you can use negative energy as fuel.
Yes, and absolutely. And it works.
It works. It gets you to the place, and then it comes out in ugly ways. You spend on nice stuff, kind of like we talked about earlier. Right. You show the success on the outside because you're trying to show, improve to someone else. Right. And then there's the good fuel in the other side. And I was curious, like, is there a way to kind of, like, there's probably a lot more people who tap into the bad fuel, and especially at a younger age. Yeah. Is there a way to, like, shift to more of the good fuel without going through thousands of dollars of therapy and trauma?
One of the things, I don't know if it's an original, but, like, one of the best teachers is experience, right?
Yeah.
Okay. And one of the best experiences to learn from is others. Yep. Right. So I think that goes back to, like, being a student, which is, at the end of the day, and this goes back to, like, not breathing your own atmosphere, right? If you get to the point where you think you've made it, or you've believed that, and that's one of the people don't talk about it, but that's one of the biggest issues with being high performance and being successful, is that when you get to the point where you feel like you've reached a certain level and you're not looking anymore, that's where there's an issue. And now if you get to the place where you're like, hey, I'm going to learn, and this also is going to go into just kind of another zone too, which is, like, be a critical thinker, right? Like, just because you are presented with an idea of success, weigh it, right? And we're so Insta feed, like, 24/7 news, updates, posts, like, things like that. But it's like, you can evaluate things and weigh them. And I tell people, like, for example, a very easy way to attack this, if you see someone that's successful, ask yourself, like, do I want to live their life? Like, not do I want their things, because usually we think of that, but do I want that life, right? Is their life, their whole life, not business, right? Their family, their health, their spiritually, like, are all those things firing on all cylinders? We were just talking about at lunch how that, was it the CEO that was caught at a game?
Yes.
Yeah. He was caught at a game with someone that wasn't his wife, and, he's got a bunch of turmoil now and stuff like that, right? From the outward perspective, that guy's successful, though. Yeah. Right? Everybody would see that and say, I want to obtain that, right? There's somebody that's looking at that right now, even with whatever's going on, and they're still looking at his life saying, that's not bad, right? I wish I had that. Or he's got XYZ that he could go do that, right? And blah, blah, blah. Not throwing judgment at the situation, because that's not what I'm pointing at. But
there's a good analogy that kind of makes your point. Not to say, like, one's worse than the other. Yeah. But, like, Elon Musk, you can look at his family life and his business. He's achieved a lot in business. Yes. But then on the family life,
it's disaster.
There could be lack. Yeah. And then you look at someone like Mark Zuckerberg. He's built a big business, but he's been with his, I think, high school sweetheart.
Yeah, his spouse, yeah.
Yeah, and he spends time with them. Yeah. And it's just a contrast of that point.
Right. And exactly to that, like, those are two paradigms, right? Where like it's like both success, right? But nobody ever takes the time to sort it and say like if everybody's just like, oh, I want this, and it's like, okay, but there's different fuel, right? Because it's not the path. The path is ultimately success, right? So it's not a deterrent from walking the path towards success. I'm not a believer in like, oh, you have to be minimalistic and you don't need anything. And even though I have my own little ranch, it's not like, oh, like be, go live off grid or anything like that, right? Things like that. So it's not saying like everyone needs to live at that level, but being content with where you are, I think is huge. I think that's a start of actually being able to critically think. If you're not content with where you are, you have a blinder on, right? If you have something that's burning in you that's like, I need to go get this, I need to find satisfaction here, I need to go find self-worth. Not a lot of people talk about that, but a lot of high performers, they're looking for self-worth. Yep. Right? It's performative love. They're like, I do this, people love me, right? So taking the time to actually take a step back and analyze, and to your point, like very successful people in their own right, completely different lives, right? I it's funny you're mentioning Elon Musk because I have respect for the guy, immense respect for the guy.
100%.
He's actually in interviews said like, you don't want my life. Like he's actually told people straight up like, you don't want that. And I will tell people the same thing. Like some of the worst times in my life is when I actually made the most money. Those are specific times where I look back and I'm like, this is horrible. And some of those worst times is what actually led me ultimately to the realization of like, I don't need all this stuff. What I need to do is focus on things that matter more to me, right? And what are those things, right? My family's important. If I can't take time to spend with my family, I remember one of the production-wise, it probably wasn't the biggest because I probably had a couple peak years after, but years ago, one of the biggest, I'll say this. It was probably one of the first times where I hit like a crazy production goal, right? Like it was absurd what I was doing, and this was years ago, so it was like is even bigger now if you weigh it. But I remember that December was the worst month of my life, and I remember the whole month. Like I remember hating, and it's like Christmas, right? And everybody's like, "Well, it's Christmas," like everybody's holidays and whatever like that. I hated my life. I don't even know. I probably got like, the paycheck that I probably got that month was like I sold a house kind of paycheck, right? But at the end of the day, I remember specifically I worked every single day, and I also worked most of Christmas Day. So, and mind you, I didn't have things structured properly. I was really just starting my career in a lot of ways. So like, there's a lot that I learned from here to there. However, it was still the point of like, why am I even doing this, right? Why am I getting to the point where like I didn't, and I didn't even have a family back then, and I still felt it. I still was like hearing like, oh yeah, we're gonna go look at Christmas. We're gonna go to Christmas this or blah 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 this, and I'm just like sitting there like texting and calling clients, and I was like, at the end of the day, what was it for, right? My manager was happy. Like I remember everybody was like, did I get a top producer award? Yeah. Was I recognized for something? Who gives a shit? My kids won't remember that. Like, it's not anything that's going to change my life, right? At the end of the day, those things really, they're a lot more temporal than people think about. In the moment, they sound great, but it's the same thing. Like, it's an instant high. It's a high is what it is, and then it's gone.
So speaking to, like, mortgage professionals, realtors, people who want to, like, move more to the place that you're at and have, like, a better structure in their business, like, what do you think, like, the hires, the boundaries, like, what are the things that they should put in place in their business or can put in place in their business to have a little more structure?
I think tactically is really understanding who you are. I think that's good. Take an inventory of what your skill set is and what you're good at. And the other thing too is and this goes back to the question that I didn't totally answer, which is how do you go from self-employed more to like an ownership role? And a lot of that comes from you taking an inventory of what are my skill sets, we started calling them, we're using big rocks right now, but like my money making activities, what are the things that actually move the needle? And, one of the things that it actually became the name of my company, the mortgage brokerage, the mortgage doctor, because that was one of my analogies that I started using with clients, because I remember when I got to the point after I was almost killing myself a few times, through production, I remember getting to the point where I was like, there are so many industries. And I thought about it because I think I had gone for, oh yeah, it was when I had a panic attack, and I remember I had to go to the doctor, and yeah, that's funny. I never thought about that, but anyways, yeah.
When was the panic attack?
The panic attack was one of those times I'm talking about where I had really, really high production, like, and I was just consumed by it, and I thought I had a heart attack. I was young. This was years ago, and it was so embarrassing because I remember like calling a friend who was a chiropractor, and I was like, my chest is tight. This doesn't make sense. And he is like, you sound like you're having a heart attack. Can you call 911? And I'm like, how does that make sense? And he's like, call 911 now. Hang up, fucking call 911. I'm on my way over there. And I just moved to the valley, so I knew like no one. But people came, they beat down my door. The paramedics showed up. They're fucking checking me. And they're like, yeah, no, you've had a severe panic attack. I was like, what is a panic attack? I'm Hispanic. Hispanics don't have panic attacks. We work hard and we die. Like, I don't need to have some like panic attack. Like, everyone's gonna think that's the dumbest shit in the world, right? It's going through my mind. And I was really worked up about like a file or something. Something stupid I was trying to close. I don't even remember. I didn't know there was like some file that I was intently working on. And and okay, so then after that, my partner at the time was like, you need to go to the doctor, like you got to go, and like, no bullshit, go. And I was like, whatever. So I made a doctor's appointment. I canceled it 3 times because I had better shit to do, and then I finally went on like the 4th reschedule. And so anyways, I go there, and the nurse comes in. I was like, yeah, I got to talk to the doctor. And they're like, oh yeah, he'll come in when he's ready. And they're doing all this stuff and blah 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 and asking me all these things or whatever like that. And I was like, okay. I'm like, so when's the doctor going to come in? And she's like, well, he's going to come in if we think he needs to come in. And I was like, well, I want to talk to him. And they were like, well, we're going to finish all this, and then we'll see if we need to bring him in. And so then the nurse is like, okay, you basically, yeah, you had a panic attack. These things are good, but it's stress. It's probably stress induced, right? So she's like, I'll see if the doctor can come in and talk to you about stress management. So the doctor comes in, starts talking to me about probably 5 minutes, right? Really, really cool guy. And I remember leaving, and I was like, man, that doctor was pretty cool. Like, it was cool. It was a cool experience. And I remember feeling stupid because I was like, I was there for like 2 hours. I saw the doctor for 5 minutes. And I'm like, that's a good doctor. I was like, that's the weirdest thing in the world. And so when I started going back to and thinking about how to reevaluate my life, I started using the analogy with my clients where I started having an assistant. And I was like, okay, so I'm the doctor. I'm always here, right? But I have my assistant. She's a nurse. Okay, she's your nurse. She's going to be there. She's going to take your vitals. She's going to go through all this stuff. She'll collect paperwork, all those things, right? If you don't need me, that's a good sign. That means things are good. Can you call me? Absolutely. Call me for anything you want because I'm always on call for you. I'll step in if I need to. But this is before I was using the brand. But that's the analogy I started using with people is I was like, okay, because I saw how they operate and I was like, I'm a professional. I'm a licensed professional. It's not the same thing. I know I didn't go to school for that. But still, I was just like, it's how I'm treating it. I'm not identifying what I'm good at. And on top of that, if that doctor had been in there for 2 hours, how many patients would that doctor have seen that day? Not that many, right? Yeah. So I was like, I'm doing a disservice to my clients, which is the opposite of what people think because they're like, oh, if I do it all, it's better for my client. Why? Why? Because of your ego? Because you think you're that good? Like, you're good at some things. You do them really, really well, right? Don't get me wrong. Everybody's got their own special sauce. But at the end of the day, like, we give ourselves a lot more credit than I think we need to give ourselves. So that was that's how it started, where I started moving the needle. And I'm like, no, there's reasons I have to be in the room, just like a reason a doctor would have to be in the room. And that was an analogy I started working in. As it kind of grew and grew and grew, it became more and more clear. And my clients still loved working with my team, just like, you would go to the doctor sometimes and not even see the doctor because the nurse took care of it all. I'm like, hey, but you're like, hey, that's my doctor's office, right? So that was part of the process that got me going to where I was like, I'm not needed for everything. The reason why I think I need to be there for everything is because of my ego, because I want people to think I'm great. Yeah. But if I do enough of the things that actually matter for people, they're still going to think I'm good. And more than that, they're going to think my team's good. So why not operate like that? And that was how I started to move. That was the first step in that direction. As it's progressed and snowballed, it's gotten to the point where it's more and more. But even now, I always look for an opportunity to pay someone to do something that I don't need to do. I don't care how good I think. Like, I love dicking around on Canva, right? Like, Canva is the worst for me because Canva, as somebody that's like very creative, and like I would consider myself more on like the scale that I use between a visionary and an integrator. I'm more of a visionary. That's how my mind works. So like, you give me a blank slate and let me like, I'm like a kid with like crayons, right? It's a time suck. Like, there's so many things that I don't need to do on there, and I've been really getting on myself about it. And I'm like, I don't need to, like, there's maybe a point where like if I'm creating a brand, I need to have my hands in it, so I start to like it starts to come alive. But then after that, I need to get the fuck out of there, and I got to get someone else in the seat. So like right now, for example, like just telling on myself, like I'm trying to get myself out of that seat right now. I'm trying to get it to where I don't touch a Canva account anymore. Right? Is it like crack to me? Yes, I love fucking around with that. And Hashim's seen me move work out some stuff, and it's like, and I'm not bad. I'll say, like, sometimes I'm like, yeah, I'm feeling it. Like I get, so like I love the creative tool, and I need to use it, like I said, when I need to delve into that, but I don't have to do it for everything, right? And so it's just identifying those things where it's like that needs to come off my plate, right? And the more that and I've actually learned this a lot from one of my restaurant regional managers, and he says it all the time. Like, management, when you get to the point where you're like ownership management, it is fairly lazy, and people don't like to hear that, because like the definition of an entrepreneur is you are not the one doing the work, right? Most people don't think about that. They're just like, oh, entrepreneur means self-employed. It doesn't. Self-employed means you're doing the work. If I like the way that Seth Godin says it, he essentially says, like, if you're self-employed, he considers you freelance. You're a freelancer, right? Yep. You're doing a project. That project's done, you get another project, or you stay with someone and you continue to do projects. But either way, it's project to project, right? We're freelance, right? That's what we do. And in that entrepreneur realm, the reason why most people are not good at it is because you have to take your hands away from a lot of things, and it's painful. Because if you're performative and you're a high performer, and you think you're the reason why it's alive, and you are, because you started it. And that's the part most people can't do. So, like, kudos, but then get the fuck out of the way and let other people do it. Because there's other people operationally, like, and I've had to bite the bullet. Like, I am not an operations person. I'm a builder. I lean more on the visionary side of things, but I'm not in the operations game. That's not my strong suit. What I do know is I know team building, so I can get the right pieces, almost like a Henry Ford ideology, where I'm not the smartest person in the room. I have the smartest people in the room, kind of a thing. And that's what I attempt to do. But that takes the acknowledgement that I'm not the smartest person in the room, and that's not an easy pill for most people to swallow. That's why people are consumed by their numbers. That's why they're trying to reach unrealistic goals, and even some goals that they're trying to reach that are realistic. It's like, why? Why are you trying to hit that, that level? What is it doing for you? If you're hitting that level to leverage yourself to get to a different level, respect. If you're just hitting that level because you think it does something for you, like, why? Right?
Yeah.
Anyways, long rant. Did I answer the question? Did I get there?
Yeah.
Okay.
It's like a lot of this kind of stems from like you seeing the doctor and seeing like how he kind of operated and ran, and then putting the people in place in the business so you could set back and only have to be in for those 5 minutes. And then also moving from like operator to owner came a little bit off the back of like it seems like it came off the back of that stress of like, oh, I don't need to be in the business all the time. And
right.
If I do it,
it was a letting go of my ego.
Yeah.
To say like, no, there's actually people that could do parts of this better than me.
Yeah.
And owning that.
Yeah.
Right.
That's a good thing. So when you look at all the businesses that you have, when it comes to building a team, culture is like one of the biggest things. Mm-hmm. How do you build a good culture?
That's actually difficult. And the thing about building a good culture is culture is not stable. It's quicksand. It's always moving, right? So culturally, I really like, I was telling you about this book earlier at lunch. I'm gonna butcher the title. No, it's another one. That one's good, but that one's more tactical. There's a book. It's the Horowitz book.
Oh,
Ben
things
Horowitz.
about hard things.
He doesn't. It's the other book that he has. I want to say it's you are what you.
You are what you say.
You are what you do, not what you say.
Yeah,
it's that one.
You are what you do, not.
And he's got. I really love the way because he talks. A lot of his book is about culture, company cultures, how to create culture. But one of his points in that book, and he gives a lot of really good examples in it. But one of the points in that book is that, with culture, it's not just what you say; it's also what you don't. It's not what you do; it's also what you don't do, right? And so, when you're creating culture. The decisions you make dictate the culture. The decisions you don't make also dictate the culture. And it took me a while to realize that. A lot of times in leadership, it's easier to be quiet. Like you see a situation and you know it's not the best situation and you don't know how to handle it. Nobody likes to have hard conversations. That's difficult. And you're just like, well, I'll leave it alone, right? But you just made a choice culturally of how people can operate, right? By not saying something you did. And so for me, that's one of the things that I look at. But once again, if anything that I'm a part of, the culture is always evolving. And one of the things that's interesting about team building is that a new team member will affect the culture. And all of a sudden, it's like now identifying that and seeing. And we've had to do that at times with teams and say, like, great person, not good for culture, not a good fit, or this is caught. Like, all of a sudden, like, where is this coming from, right? And you trace it back, and there's, like, one person that's, like, kind of playing this little blah 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 game with people, and you're like, okay, that's affecting the culture now. Like, and I've had it at times where like culture is great in some of my operations, and I've had it at times where like nobody wants to set foot in the door, and it's like it takes a reshuffling of it. So I'm just a believer of it's alive. It's like having a garden. Like you're gonna have to weed it, you're gonna have to water it, you're gonna have to at times take a plant out to put a plant in. Right,
analogy.
It's living, right, and it's not just something that's static. And a lot of corporately, you're trained opposite. Corporately, you're like, oh well, culture is culture because it's like this is what we do, blah blah blah, whatever. But that's why a lot of corporations don't have great culture because there's nothing there. There's nothing to really grab onto. They lean more on political correctness more so than like actually having something that stands for something, if that makes sense. And it's definitely not easy. It's something that's challenging. It takes work like anything else, but is it worth it at the end of the day? Like absolutely. And there's a handful of people that I have looked at for examples. Some here locally, some leadership as well. Where we'll have conversations. I'm like, I love what you're doing with your team. Like I love. I'll go ahead and give him a shout out. But like Eric Rodriguez, like he's got a great line when he talks about his top producers. He's a broker for Lifestyle Realty in Turlock, and his line is like, I don't make high producers. Like they do that. They make themselves high producers. He doesn't take credit for somebody being a high producer. I'm paraphrasing it, but I love that ideology because he's like, no, I'm here. I give them this, but like I didn't give them that.
Yeah.
Right. I give them a construct that they can plug into, but they're doing that.
Yep.
And so he doesn't take credit for it, which I think is great. And so in the same token, when people are like, whatever, he's not like, oh yeah, look at how many he's just like, no, this is what I am, this is what I do. And it's a great culture that it creates, right? And if people want to be a high producer, they go and they talk to the high producers. They're not looking at him and saying, you're the one that makes it. And a lot of times as leaders, it's very difficult not to take credit for everything, right? Everything that goes right, you'd want to take credit for, but the truth is sometimes you're not responsible for that. Are you the one that brought the pieces in the room? Yeah, absolutely. But that doesn't mean that you are dictating everything that's in the room at that point, right? Yeah. And so
goes back to what you're saying is just like eliminate the ego and
Ryan Holiday, ego is the enemy. Like I'm a huge fan of stoicism and getting into I was heavily into that for a few years, and kind of looking at some of those principles. I still smile and I laugh. I'm not saying I'm hardcore, but I loved a lot of those ideologies that Ryan Holiday talks about. So I think he does have a book called Ego is the Enemy. That's one of them. But The Obstacle is the Way is another really good. Really, really good book. But but a lot of those things too, like those are things that I also ruminate on. I need to get back to it, actually. That's a good reminder. I haven't done that in a little while. But I used to always be reading through something like that. And it's just a good refresher for most of the time what gets you in trouble with business is your ego, right? Yeah. It's also what gets you into business. Yeah. So, right? So it's like But it's fuel, right? At the end of the day, it's fuel, and any time where that fuel mixture is off too much, but you do need it, like you need to put fuel in a car for it to work, right? And for it to operate. And so it's not a horrible thing, but if you let it loose, it does become horrible and it becomes consuming. And that's the balance part, right?
Yeah, and the garden was another good analogy. If people want to follow you, where should they? If they
You don't have to, guys. Not me. No. If you guys want to follow, I have my personal Instagram, which is Dr. Tom Strong, and that's not because I'm a weightlifter. I found this band and people made them when I was in the hospital, and so Dr. Thom, Tom with an H, Strong. That's my personal, and then if you want to follow our journey with fuel, you can follow us at The Fuel Events on Instagram as well. And see what we're getting into there. Mortgage company, has a lot of real estate professionals on this too. Yeah. Mortgage company, if you want to tag along with us, that is The Mortgage Doctor. Actually, The Mortgage DR on Instagram.
Nice.
Yeah.
So last question, after everything that you've learned, if you had to boil it down to like one thing, what does world-class leadership mean to you?
World-class leadership to me means it's a leadership style that is developing, it is holistically developing individuals. I think is the easiest way for me to say it. If it's holistic, I'm a huge fan of that. Going back to the right and wrong question, I don't know if one style necessarily does it or not. I do believe that there are certain styles that are a little bit better at that because it's geared differently. But yeah, I have tremendous respect for any leadership that is doing that. I think that that's the lost art. You know, we don't hear in this generation anymore people that have retired from companies after being there for 30 years. Nobody aspires for that right now, right? And the truth of the matter is, I don't think it's because people are that different. I think because leadership is not what it used to be too. I think when there's a holistic approach, I think that, and it is truly holistic. I think that, you know, there's a saying, people don't leave companies, they leave people, right? So I from my perspective, that's the best. And I have been alongside leaders that I feel like have that more as a core, and it's been a great, those are the organizations that I wish I never left, but those are also the organizations when I build an organization that I try to emulate because I respected it so much, you know? So yeah. I think that's the best definition I can give you.
From the outside looking in, it looks like you're leading by example. So
trying to as much as possible, but it's difficult. It's a learning lesson, but like I said, I mean, I think the biggest thing with leadership is giving yourself. It's a lot like being a parent. You know, you don't have kids yet, right?
No, not yet.
Okay, yeah. So I have a 6-week-old right now, and when you're a parent, it's such an interesting thing because there's no rule book. I mean, now we have like TikTok and all these things where we can Google what does this baby noise mean? But the truth of the matter is, like, you have to learn on the job, right? What's interesting about parenthood, though, is that there's a lot more instinctual there than people give themselves credit for. And what's also interesting about parenthood is that there's a lot of resilience usually to children that we give them less credit for, right? And I feel like it's the same thing with leadership in a lot of ways, right? If you boil it down, right, it's that same thing where it's like, hey, give yourself credit, like instinctually. I love this quote. It's actually on my wall over there, but it's like, stop debating what a good man is and be one, right? Because you can get into the weeds so many times on like, well, what is this and what is that? But at the end of the day, you can just be it to the best that you know how, and that will automatically make you better, right? So if you want to get better at leading, start trying to be a good leader. You're going to have to learn, right? You will learn because you won't feel like you're it, and that'll push you to learn more, which then makes you better, right?
Yeah.
It's an interesting dynamic, but that's the truth.